Join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. The biggest strike in a decade is well underway this morning. Up to 500,000 workers are walking out in increasingly bitter disputes over pay, jobs and conditions. Schools, universities, trains, buses, the civil service, they are all taking action today. Are you fed up of all these strikes, or have you just learned to live with them? Let me know on Twitter, won't you? But it's not just strikes on the show today. Phil Campion and Tonya Buxton will be here with lots of other news stories from the day, including the private letters of Princess Diana, which are going up for sale. We've got lots to get stuck into between now and midday. All coming up after a look at the latest news with Ray.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. 1 minute past 10. Here's the latest. Hundreds of thousands of workers are taking part in Walkout Wednesday, the biggest day of industrial action for more than a decade. Up to 500,000 workers belonging to 7 trade unions have walked out over pay, jobs and conditions. Teachers belonging to the National Education Union are starting their first day of strikes, leaving 85% of schools fully or partially closed. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan admitted to GB News that the deal is not close.
They didn't break down, but they basically said very clearly, look, we can't do anything to stop this strike. This is going ahead on the 1st of February, but we do have 28 days between this and the next strike, so we will continue those discussions. But what we can't do is offer inflation busting pay rises, because we're really focused on getting inflation down and halving the inflation for everybody, so we all feel better and have more money in our pockets.
Well, Kevin Courtney is the General Secretary of the National Education Union. He says the government needs to find the money.
They never thought we'd reach these thresholds. They weren't planning on us reaching them. And since we've reached the thresholds, 40,000 more people have joined the union as well. So it does show there's a huge strength of feeling in the profession that government must act and put things right. I think Gillian Keegan is hoping that the strike won't be effective and there won't be any further action. There could be further action. She needs to do a deal so that that doesn't happen.
Border Force officers and bus and train drivers have also walked out, causing widespread travel disruption. Train drivers belonging to ASLEF and the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union taking their first industrial action of the year, with another walkout scheduled for Friday. ASLEF General Secretary Mick Whelan told us workers are really feeling the cost of living crisis.
At some point, something's got to give. At some point, some form of compromise has to take place. But, we see it's not just rail workers, don't we? We see there's about 1 million people out on strike today, from the civil service to the teachers to the lecturers to all sorts of people all over the place. So, yes, there's a cost of living crisis. All workers are feeling it. And in all sectors, at some point, someone's got to take the shackles off and allow people to talk and make the deals that need to be done for the good of the country.
UK house prices have fallen for the 5th month in a row, down by 0.6% on December. Nationwide's house price index shows the average UK home now costs just over £258,000. Annual house price growth slowed to 1.1% in January, compared to 2.8% in December. It comes as the Bank of England is poised to raise interest rates for the 10th consecutive time. Will Rice of Generation Home told us demand for mortgages has fallen dramatically. Meanwhile, retail prices are at a record high after a rise in inflation last month. January saw the highest inflation rate ever listed in the food category. Food rose to 13.8%. That's up 0.6% from the month previous. Meanwhile, clothing and footwear prices eased during the New Year sales. Analysis by the Labour Party has found that an average of one serious offender on probation has been found guilty of murder in England and Wales every week since 2010. Meanwhile, every week, 2 serious offenders out on probation are found guilty of rape or attempted rape. Labour says it raises fresh questions over releasing dangerous prisoners, with the most recent example being the brutal murder of Zara Alina by Jordan McSweeney. Shadow Justice Secretary Steve Reed told us one of the biggest issues is a shortage of staff.
So we can see these services are collapsing. So what's gone wrong is back in 2014, the government forced through a botched part privatisation of these services. Everyone told them don't do it. It was the disaster that was predicted. 4 years later, they did a rushed renationalisation, but they lost an awful lot of experienced probation officers. There are parts of the service that are still carrying 45% vacancies.
And finally, a new report claims that Alec Baldwin's so-called reckless actions directly caused the fatal shooting of cinematographer Elena Hutchins on the set of the movie Rust in 2021. The Santa Fe District Attorney's Office alleges that the actor failed to attend mandatory firearms training. Both Baldwin and the film's armourer have now been formally charged with involuntary manslaughter. If convicted, he could face up to 5 years in jail. Showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield says Mr Baldwin's media interviews prior to being charged could potentially be used against him.
When Alec Baldwin was first approached by police officers on the set, he says, "I'm the one that shot the gun." However, in interviews that he gave to media, several media outlets throughout this process, Alec says that the gun just went off automatically. It just went off, he told ABC. So I think that really is going to hurt him in the end, giving those interviews, when you have contradictory video.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Bev.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News TV and DAB Radio. Here's what's coming up on the show this morning. There's only one place to start. Walkout Wednesday. We're expecting more than 500,000 workers to strike today across many different sectors. Trained staff, civil servants and teachers who, in an attempt to twist the knife, weren't obliged to tell their school heads if they intended to desert their classrooms today. Yep, you heard that correct. They're all on strike. We're going to be crossing over to picket lines in towns across the UK in the next 2 hours. And lots of interesting news stories in the papers today with Tonya Buxton and Phil Campion, including the teacher sacked for refusing to use a trans pupil's new name, and a Jane Austen novel the university teachers are giving a trigger warning to. Private letters from Princess Diana also that revealed she wouldn't have separated from Prince Charles if she knew it was going to be so, in her words, desperate and ugly. Also, major retail bosses have joined forces with London Mayor Sadiq Khan to call for return of VAT-free shopping for tourists. That's right, for tourists, but not for you. And of course, this show is nothing without you and your views. Don't forget to vote in our Twitter poll this morning. I'm asking you, is your day being disrupted by these strikes? I would love to know, because in some ways, I think we've just learnt to live with them, haven't we? So far, 75% of you say that you are not affected. So email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, to have your say. So, as I've said, hundreds of thousands of workers are taking part in Walkout Wednesday, the biggest day of industrial action for more than a decade. Let's start with the teachers. Those belonging to the National Education Union are starting their first day of strikes, leaving 85% of schools fully or partially closed. Our reporter Jack Carson is outside a school in Edgbaston in Birmingham this morning. Hello, Jack. You've been speaking to parents there, I believe, this morning. How are they feeling about this disruption?
Well, disruption is exactly the word, Bev, that I think probably sums up today, as you mentioned, Walkout Wednesday. Today, for every school across the country, it's a different story, because for a lot of schools, they've got certain year groups in. For some, they've got half and half. That's very much the situation here, where they've got 2 classes in every year, but only one of the 2 classes of the year group is in, and the other child is at home. So you can imagine, if you're a parent with 2 children, both say in year 4, one of them in one year 4 class might be in, the other one is being asked to stay at home because they don't have the staff with these teachers' strikes to be able to look after the children and cover those lessons. But I did speak to one parent outside the school's gates this morning, and this is what she told me.
These guys are more than just teachers. They do a lot. Being a parent's hard, and they do this job because they want to, so they should get what they want. I wanted to do this job, and it's hard, so no, I understand why they're doing it. Don't get me wrong, it's a bit of an inconvenience, but look how many people are striking today. The government should actually be listening now. It's not just 1 or 2, it's most sectors. So they got to do what they got to do, ain't they? Can't really say much more than that.
Very much the feeling here in Birmingham. A lot of the parents I've spoken to are supportive of the strikes, no matter how much disruption it may have caused them today with their children. But in terms of what the teachers are asking for, we know there's a few things that teachers are really pushing for with this industrial action. One of them being the underfunding to schools. The government, in response to that, saying that it's committing to giving £2 billion of extra funding to schools. And of course, the other 2 being the squeeze on the school day and hours and the teacher workload. One teacher on social media saying that, you know, how many other jobs you expected to work during your holiday times. This is what the teacher unions are especially pushing for. But we know in terms of the government response, Nick Gibb, who's the schools minister, saying that ongoing discussions remain, that they're very constructive, and that it was disappointing that the National Education Union decided to go ahead with these strikes and with all the disruption that it's going to cause for millions of children across the country. Labour and Angela Rayner saying that Rishi Sunak she accused Rishi Sunak of weak leadership and said that to come to the negotiating table to help sort out this chaos. But for many parents across the country, the situation is they're having to go to almost back to, for some of them, a pandemic style of teaching, with some of their children being asked to stay at home and do their work from there.
Unbelievable. Thank you, Jack. Jack Carson there in the Midlands. So Sinead McBrearty is the CEO of Education Support, and she joins me now. Good morning, Sinead.
Morning, Bev.
Good morning. What is Education Support? Is this an organisation which helps teachers to manage the stress of their job? Am I right?
Yes, we're a mental health charity working in education. We've been doing that for 146 years. So we're supporting educators, the workforce with mental health, with stress, but also trying to help shape the policy environment to create an environment where people want to work and stay working in the profession, because we know recruitment and retention are such an issue facing the country at the moment.
Well, hang on a bit. So teachers at the moment get about 170 days a year holiday. The starting pay in England, an unqualified teacher, the minimum is nearly 20 grand. In London, maximum is 35,000. If you're a head teacher, you can earn up to £130,000. This isn't a terrible job, is it?
I guess if it was that attractive, Bev, we'd be swamped by people wanting to be in the profession. And the reality on the ground is that we're losing more teachers each year than we can replace. The recruitment numbers are low. They've been declining for the last 10 years. They continue to decline. And we're now seeing, we have in England, for example, one of the youngest workforces in schools across the OECD. And that reflects the fact that people just can't stay in this job as a long-term career. So there probably are conversations and other people who can give you a point of view on pay. But what we see through our research is that 3/4 of the education workforce experience mental health issues in any given year. 3/4 of staff report significant levels of stress, and that rises to 84% of school leaders. We measure the well-being of the workforce compared to the general population, and the education workforce is in considerably less good health. And they would perceive that as being a result of workforce pressure, workload pressure than the wider general population. So there's some really serious mental health issues, chronic stress issues, and that has an impact on people's health in the long term. It certainly affects their willingness to stay in the job.
Well, the thing is, Sinead, teachers have been around for a very, very long time. And why did teachers not previously have these sorts of mental health issues? The teaching job in itself hasn't changed that much, has it?
That's a great question, Bev. I think that's exactly actually the nub of the issue. The teaching job has changed really dramatically. And I think when you talk to teachers and you understand what's taking them out to the front line, it is precisely that. Here we are, we're in an austerity COVID sandwich. We had a decade of austerity. We then had a once in a generation pandemic to contend with. And we're back into austerity again. And the net effect of that in schools is really real. So we have education recovery. We're trying to help children and young people get back to where they were before the pandemic. We've got a significant increase in special educational needs in schools. We've got rising levels of mental health issues for children and young people, which turn up in our schools. And we now have families and children living in poverty, with teachers taking kids' clothes home to wash them, paying for uniforms and food. So I think it is exactly that the nature of the job has changed. Over the last 10 years, we've seen really a decimation of children's care services, and schools hoover up that broken, wider public service position. So you've got teachers taking home concerns about safeguarding, dealing with families who've got very serious domestic situations, and as I say, routinely, actually, dealing with children who are really not well, but have no access to support because children's mental health services are unable to take referrals.
I totally appreciate all of the above, and I have no doubt those situations are true. But what you're describing is a picture in which children are the victims of various other services or parents which have let them down. In that situation, the people who should be looking after these kids are the teachers. And yet by striking, the teachers are making the children victims of their action as well.
I think when you look at the overall funding situation, Bev, so for example, I spend more on my weekly shop now than I ever have. Spending on my weekly shop is at its highest ever level. However, the amount of food I bring home for that is considerably less than it used to be. And we see a parallel process in education. Spending might be high, but the demand in the system is much higher still. We are burning through teachers who've come into the profession with a real sense of vocation because actually they get there. There are insufficient resources. There are more issues facing children and young people than are being funded to be dealt with. And the experience is deeply dissatisfying and demoralizing. If you're someone who's gone into this job, as the vast majority do, with a real commitment to improving outcomes for children and young people, but the resources just aren't there to let you do that, That's a pretty dreadful place to be. You're watching children and young people struggle. You know something could be done, but the resources aren't there. And indeed, when it comes to mental health, if you are burnt out and exhausted, and we see very high levels of this in the workforce due to workload, you can't turn up and do the best that you can for those kids in the classroom, because the quality of teaching, of course, matters. And I think that's why you see 62% of Mumsnet users supporting strikes. And it's why, as your interviewee in Birmingham just said there, parents understand this. They see it. And parents like me who've had kids go through the system, we can see the difference now for our younger children compared to what was available for our older children.
Okay.
I think that's why you're seeing support among parents for this.
OK, all right. Thank you, Sinead. Sinead McBrearty there, the CEO of Education Support. The irony is not lost on me that when teachers were calling for more lockdowns and the economy was about to tank and we were going to have nothing left in the coffers, this was going to happen. And now here they are striking. Anyway, let me know what you think, won't you? On to our next set of strikes. It's university workers this time. Over 70,000 UCU members are striking across the UK in February and March. Joining us now is GB News Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie. He's outside Queen's University in Belfast. Dougie, tell us about these strikes. What are this particular group of people moaning about?
Well, these strikes, welcome to, first of all, the very wet and sodden Queen's University in Belfast. And yes, these university lecturers behind us are striking over a number of issues. They say that they haven't been looked at in 15 years and basically they're getting paid for 4 days but working 5. They want their pensions secured. They want casual workers' contracts looked at more closely. And of course, they want a pay rise in line with inflation. And I spoke with Sean O'Connell, who is the president of the branch here at Queen's University, and he thinks that there's plenty of money, but it must be put out better.
Well, we're here. We've been taking action for 5 years. We've had 15 years of real terms pay cuts of 25%, so we want a pay rise, a real pay rise. We've had a 35% pension cut, so we want negotiations to return some of those cuts because we think they're entirely unfair and they're based on flawed financial analysis, and the Financial Times agrees with us on that. And we want real solutions to the significant workload issues and issues of casualisation that are a factor here at Queen's and across higher education in the UK.
OK, thank you, Dougie, there in Northern Ireland. Don't forget to vote in our Twitter poll this morning. It's all very well talking about the strikes, and no doubt they are affecting kids in schools, parents who can't send their kids to school today. They might be affecting you. I want to know if they are. Has your day today been disrupted by the strikes? At the moment, 76% of you are not affected, you say. As always, send me an email as well, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I will get to as many of them as I can. After the break, we're going to welcome my panel, broadcaster Tonya Buxton and former SAS trooper Phil Campion. I know they'll have a few choice words for those who are striking. Tonya actually is a former teacher, so stay tuned to see what they have to say. See you in 2.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning. Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. Thanks for finding us. Now, let me introduce you to my panel this morning. I am pleased to be joined by broadcaster and restaurateur Tonya Buxton and a former SAS trooper and author Phil Campion. Good to have you here, guys. Right, let's talk about these strikes. I was getting a little bit wound up there listening to the woman who looks after these teachers, Tonya, as 500,000 people strike across the country today. It's effectively triggered a kind of mini lockdown for a lot of parents. Apparently they have a terrible job. It's all because of their mental health and they can't cope with it. Why did teachers used to be able to cope with it and now they can't?
Well, you raised such a great point when you said during lockdown, when these teachers were, asking for more lockdowns and more draconian ways that the children couldn't go into school and all of this. Well, where did they think the money was coming from, first and foremostly? So, I don't know if you know, but I was a school teacher.
Yes, you mentioned it earlier. I said before the ads, yeah.
And so I worked in Tottenham, which is quite a challenging area, most of all. And I had a lot of kids in my class that were not necessarily abused, but severe neglect. And school was their safe place. I wouldn't be striking now if I was a teacher because I knew too many of those kids needed somewhere to come into. I couldn't do it. And the way that the unions behaved during lockdown, I will never forgive them for what they did to our children. They could have insisted that teachers went in. They could have done that.
Do you sympathise, though, when you hear OK, let me just play devil's advocate. The lady who I was interviewing just before, who was saying that they don't have the resources in the classroom, they don't have the teaching assistants, they don't have the help for so many more kids with learning needs now than we've ever had before, and the disruption, and that actually they need to make a statement, not just for their pay, but for the sake of all the children's education.
I understand that, and I agree with it. I'm not a teacher anymore. It was too hard.
Yeah.
Bev, it was too hard. My whole life was... I had no time for my own children because everything went into teaching. It was just too hard. So, yes, I do think there need to be better resources, but I think that the way the money is broken up is wrong. I don't know whether we should have lots of teaching assistants. I think we should just make sure that we get the best teachers. Unfortunately, when I was teaching, I came across some really terrible teachers. I came across people who had gone and done their degrees, didn't really know what they wanted to do, so did a kind of PGCE, became a teacher because it was an easy job to get, and were not vocational teachers.
Yeah.
We need to encourage vocational teachers who love kids, who want to teach, and we also need to get rid of all of this rubbish. One of the stories that's coming up later is that trans argument, gender, and all these kind of non-teaching, non-educational things that are coming into schools that are tying teachers up, and they can't teach properly.
Yeah.
There's a lot wrong with the system. I do agree with that.
Phil Campion, let me come to you. I know that you feel really strongly about the well-being of young people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you feel on a day like today?
The well-being of the children is the primary thing in all of this, all right? So that's being overlooked a little bit, I think, by striking. Kids have had a tough time. They continue to have a tough time. And as, was alluded to there, this is a safe space for some kids. This is a space where they can actually go and do something and feel like they're achieving and feel wanted.
Yeah.
I don't think they've taken into consideration that. Look, teachers get more time off than John Wayne's safety catch. We know that. Do you know what I mean? They really do, OK? And so, you have your teacher training days. Why don't you spend some of those days constructively looking about how you can change the situation?
170 days a year holiday.
Absolutely, absolutely. So much time off, do you know what I mean? Use some of that time off, but have a few more teacher training days in that time off and see where you can make the changes. You're there because you're supposed to be resourceful people. Well, take some of that resourcefulness and start looking at how you can improve the situation. Don't just sit back and whinge and stamp your feet. I'm not coming in today. That ain't right, is it?
No.
We know that.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I sympathise with them. As we know, it is a valuable job. It is the most important job. all of us would agree on that.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And yet there's something wrong with the mentality, it seems, of the people who are going into teaching now. Some of the teachers, it's just me, me, me. What about me? What about your kids?
I mean, worse than the strike itself as well were these ones that are taking their children to stand on the picket line with them. Yeah. What's that teaching them?
Well, some might say it's teaching them, people power.
No, it's not teaching them that at all. In my view, in my opinion, it's teaching you to stamp your feet until you get what you want.
Yeah.
And that's not how I brought my kids up.
Is it just the fact that they're asking for too much money, Tonya? Isn't it that they're asking for something that is just not reasonable, and maybe they just have to all come together and negotiate and to come to some sort of reasonable settlement?
I agree with that. I don't think teachers get enough money, and we do. There is a lot of time off, but let me tell you, when you earn a teacher's wage, you haven't got much money to do anything with that time off. I remember that because during the holidays, would train people. I was a personal trainer and did lots of things. I wrote books, I wrote articles, I did everything to subsidise my teaching training because it wasn't teaching money because it wasn't enough. My problem is I know we're talking about the strikes now, but I think we need to go all the way back and make sure that we encourage the right kind of people
to go
into teaching, and we get good teachers, and we reward good teachers, and we get rid of bad teachers. Do you know how hard it is to get rid of a bad teacher?
Yes, very hard. Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. OK, but talking of the older generation of students, university. Now, this is the University of Greenwich. It's given a trigger warning to poor pupils who may not have the strength of character to read a Jane Austen novel without being triggered by the gender stereotyping and the sexism. Phil Campion, let me come to you on this. How fragile must these young people be?
It's bonkers. And what's it showing them? Do you know what I mean? And this is the same university people, by the way, who are out on strike at the moment.
That's right.
Do you know what I mean? That's just it's incredibly insane. It's the emperor's clothes again, isn't it? And nobody wants to say anything to them. Look, this stuff can't carry on, surely. Where's it going to get to? Where are we actually going to get to with this stuff? Do you know what I mean? It needs ironing out, doesn't it?
Well, any society that always changes the rules for the accommodation of those who can't cope. That sounds terrible. You know, we need a welfare state. We need to look after people who need genuine help. But it feels at the moment that we're creating a kind of victim mindset.
Everybody. It's as if everybody needs their little victimship. You know what I mean? I've got to have my little thing. Look, this stuff's been taught for years. Get from it what you actually we're trying to achieve from it, which is some literature skills. Take it for what it is. Do you know what I mean? If you don't like it, you don't have to read it.
That's right.
And that's the way it is, you know. But you don't need to change it. You know, saying that the Gothic literature was even worse.
Well, it was written in 1817, of course, Jane Austen. It's apparently the gender stereotyping, Tonya. It contains toxic relationships and friendships. That is what Jane Austen did. I mean, she would be turning in a grave.
Brilliant at it, wasn't she? She kind of took the mickey out of everyone.
Everybody.
And that's why she was brilliant. How much money is this costing? How much money is it costing to put these trigger warnings all over the shop? Why don't you put that money into educating kids? Why don't you do that with the money? I'm so sick of this. It makes my blood boil. And do you know what it really does do? It just absolutely negates people who actually do have mental health issues.
Yeah.
Now, I know people who suffer severely from depression, who their world is racked by the problems that they have with their mental health. And then you're coming out with this fluff, rubbish fluff. Stop it.
I know.
Because it just belittles the reality of mental health.
Well, the logic is, just so that, because if you are sat there with your head in your hands like we are largely, this is what the Open University spokesman has said about it. A small number of people may have suffered from trauma in their past and may benefit from a prior warning. With those students in mind, we think it is sensible to flag some course content and work with them so they too can have the opportunity to access these classic texts.
No, I disagree with them again. I think that they're almost sort of like sticking a flag in something that doesn't need to be stuck in there. Do you know what I mean? They're making it a big deal.
If you're a genuine victim of trauma, of some sort of traumatic past, I don't know what kind of trauma you could have from gender stereotyping or, a nicely sketched character. But anyway, because they have these toxic relationships. If you were genuinely a victim of a toxic relationship, the last thing that's going to bother you is a passage in a 19th century novel.
No, I can't see in any way, shape or form where this would damage anybody in particular.
Do you know what I think, though? I think maybe they're trying to condition people into having a fragile mental state. We're stopping our kids from being resilient anymore and tough, aren't we? We're saying, no, are you sure you're not distressed and suffering from trauma when you read this? It's almost like, it's like the nudge that went on during lockdown. It's almost like a nudge that's going on in education. Tell the kids that they're fragile, that they can't take it, they're not emotionally intelligent, they're not robust, and let them all just pitter into nothing and become weaker and weaker. Don't you think that's what's happening?
I think there is, definitely an element of, I've heard it quite a few times just lately. Tough times create tough people. We're in quite an easy time at the moment, and it's creating even easier people.
Decades, arguably. That's the thing. I say to my kids all the time, you know what? Life is tough, but you are tougher. Now, after the break, a shocking story. A failed Iranian asylum seeker who should have been removed from the UK years ago is due to be sentenced today for the brutal killing of an elderly woman who had given him a home. Our home security editor, Mark White, will join me in the studio to discuss that after your morning's news.
32 minutes past 10, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Hundreds of thousands of workers are taking part in Walkout Wednesday, the biggest day of industrial action for more than a decade. Up to 500,000 workers belonging to 7 trade unions are striking over pay, jobs and conditions. Teachers belonging to the National Education Union are on the picket line, leaving 85% of schools fully or partially closed. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan told us a deal is not close.
They didn't break down, but they basically said very clearly, look, we can't do anything to stop this strike. This is going ahead on the 1st of February, but we do have 28 days between this and the next strike, so we will continue those discussions. But what we can't do is offer inflation busting, pay rises, because we're really focused on getting inflation down and halving the inflation for everybody, so we all feel better and have more money in our pockets.
Well, Kevin Courtney is the General Secretary of the National Education Union. He says the government needs to find the money.
They never thought we'd reach these thresholds. They weren't planning on us reaching them. And since we've reached the thresholds, 40,000 more people have joined the union as well. So it does show there's a huge strength of feeling in the profession that government must act and put things right. I think Gillian Keegan is hoping that the strike won't be effective and there won't be any further action. There could be further action. She needs to do a deal so that that doesn't happen.
In other news, UK house prices have fallen for the 5th month in a row, down by 0.6% on December. Nationwide's house price index shows that the average home now costs just over £258,000. Annual house price growth slowed to 1.1% in January. It comes as the Bank of England is poised to raise interest rates for the 10th consecutive time. And a further 1,500 patients of a convicted breast surgeon are being recalled so their treatment can be investigated. Ian Patterson was handed a 20-year prison sentence in 2017 after he was convicted on 17 counts of wounding people with intent. Over 14 years, he subjected more than 1,000 patients to unnecessary and damaging operations in the West Midlands. The new patients were discovered after a trawl through old IT systems. We're on TV, online and on DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Back to Bev in just a moment.
He's the king of breakfast TV and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate. with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Very good morning, welcome back. It's 10:36. This is Bev Turner today on GB News TV and DAB radio. So, a failed Iranian asylum seeker who should have been removed from the UK years ago is due to be sentenced today for the brutal killing of an elderly woman who'd given him a home. The 34-year-old is due to be sentenced later today at Leeds Crown Court. With more details of this horrific case, our Home Security editor Mark White joins me now. This is a really shocking story, Mark. What happened?
It's horrific. This individual, 34-year-old Shaheen Darvish Naranjan, he was taken in by an 88-year-old woman called Brenda Blaney in the village of Thornton Le Dale, which is in North Yorkshire, up towards Scarborough there. He'd befriended her. He worked in a restaurant in Leeds. And they'd kind of formed almost like a grandmother-grandson type relationship over a number of years. And she eventually invited him to her home, gave him a room, but he was paranoid schizophrenic, according to the medical evidence in court. And in January of last year, the 5th of January, he killed this old woman, he said, because of voices in his head telling him to do that. She had been on the phone, this woman, to a local shop to order some food to be delivered. When the line went dead, the worried shopkeeper had called back a dozen times to try to make contact with her again. It's at that point, obviously, the police believe that she'd been killed. She was strangled, her head smashed against the kitchen wall. She was stabbed repeatedly in the chest, and her throat was cut. It's absolutely horrific. But as horrific as the crime is, what is really, really concerning about this case is the fact that this man was a failed asylum seeker. He'd come to the UK in 2005 as a 15-year-old to study. His permission to remain in the UK ran out in 2015. So he then went on, as so many people do, to claim asylum and try to stay in the country that way. But I'm told that all of his appeals were exhausted by 2017. Yet, despite the fact that all those appeals were exhausted, for 5 more years, Home Office officials did not remove this man from the UK. He should never have been here in the first place. And clearly he went on to kill this frail elderly woman who, by all accounts, was, a very lovely, kind-hearted individual that just wanted to do the right thing, yeah.
What a tragic story. And actually, it just shows, I think, for me as well, how raising awareness of the problems of illegal immigrants, because nobody has won in that situation. He certainly hasn't won. She hasn't won. The system hasn't won. The prison service, which will now be paying for his incarceration, hasn't won. And that's why it's important, isn't it, that we stop these small boats?
Yes,
I mean, did he come? Do we know if he came over on a small boat as 15?
No, I think he came here legitimately to study, but then obviously stayed on longer than he should have, and when he was found out, then tried to claim asylum. That's how lots of people who enter the country, it's not just about coming across in small boats. People come across in student visas, on holidays, short working visas, and they stay on and they become in essence, illegal immigrants that way. And of course, often then when they're found out, they will go on to claim asylum as a way of trying to game the system, of trying to stay in the country. That's what happened in the case of this particular Iranian man. And listen, lots of people born and bred in this country go on to commit criminal offences and to kill people. That happens.
Yes.
But the fact of this man is that, he should never have been here and able to carry out this crime. He should have been removed 5 years before he then went on to kill this elderly woman.
Yeah, because also, and I don't mean this is to make excuses, but he was living in a sort of torturous mental limbo, not knowing what his future was going to hold. And therefore, had he been sent back to his original country of origin earlier to get settled, to resettle himself, well, this woman would still be alive.
Yeah, I mean, there was medical evidence in court that pointed to, a life of problems in terms of his mental health. He had psychotic episodes. At one point, he was in the United States and was in an institution there for a while dealing with his mental health issues. So clearly he had problems, and you can argue about his level of culpability in the actual crime. That's not the point. The scandal here is that, why on earth in this system that the government admits clearly is a broken asylum system, are people still 5 years after they've exhausted all avenues of appeal still here? Sources have told me, official sources, that if we had the Rwanda plan, problem solved, he could have been sent off to Rwanda for processing. Even if there was an issue about returning him to Iran, that wouldn't have been an issue. You could do it with Rwanda. Well, Rwanda's not going anywhere fast. It's mired in the legal challenges in the court. So that's a moot point.
OK. Thank you, Mark. Thanks so much. Now, let me know what you think of all of our topics today. Let me give you some of your views. This is about Walkout Wednesday, biggest strike day for a decade in the UK. Jim says, I came from a very violent home. Primary school for me was a sanctuary and I loved it. It was a refuge for me. The weekends were hell. School is very important. Please don't strike. Amy has said, in my opinion, teaching is a struggling profession because inclusion is not staffed or resourced properly. Ironically, the pupil support staff are the first to go when budgets are stretched. And Leona says, I know of 2 newly qualified teachers who can only get 1-year working contracts from schools. They've said if it doesn't change, they will have to look for a different job because they can't get mortgages with that short-term outlook. Working conditions for teachers are dire and in need of addressing. Keep your messages coming, won't you? GBViews at gbnews.uk. And I've got a Twitter poll running today on @GBnews, and I want to know whether the strikes have disrupted your day. Let me know. Now, have you heard of the 15-minute city plan? This government, in fact, every government around the world is bizarrely in lockstep with this, wants everyone in England to live within walking distance of green space or water. It sounds lovely in principle, but it's yet another idea which Environment Secretary Therese Coffey says has arisen out of lockdowns. And remember, yesterday, Matt Hancock was on TV warning that lessons must be learnt for the next pandemic. So, to discuss this taxpayer-funded scheme, I'm joined by Dr. Christian Dunn, who's a senior lecturer in natural sciences at Bangor University. Hello, Christian. Good to see you again.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Good morning. Now, this vision, which Rishi Sunak has described as central to his target of not just halting but reversing the decline of nature, sounds wonderful in principle. But surely in England right now, people are worried about paying their bills, living near schools which stay open and having access to a GP more than having to walk 10 minutes to see a squirrel. And it smacks of eco-zealotry in place of common sense, doesn't it?
Well, I think there's a little bit of fudging of 2 issues here. So the giving access to people 15 minutes from their home to green space or water, that's part of the government's environmental improvement plan, which was announced earlier this week. But then the 15-minute city, although probably could incorporate that is a different issue there. When it comes to giving people access to green space or water, that's many benefits for that in terms of well-being. So if you're looking at this as a binary kind of question about should we pay money for this when we need to spend money on that's actually a little bit more complex, because when you look at giving people access to green space, then their well-being, physical and mental improves, and that has been shown to save money for things like the NHS. So it's not quite as simple as that. When it comes to 15-minute cities, I think that is a bit of a different issue than giving people access to green space, because that incorporates giving them access to everything, all sorts of parts of a community. And that is different. And my views on that would probably be slightly different in terms of environmental side of things.
What do you mean? Because I think they are very much tied. These are very much the same sort of issue. So people will have everything within the 15 minutes that they live, whether that is a rubbish municipal park with a rusty seesaw, frankly, or an office building or a school. So the idea that we're going to have these areas which you walk to within 15 minutes, it's all the same picture, isn't it, of changing human behaviour?
Yeah, but it does worry me when, as an environmentalist, as a natural scientist, it does worry me when big movements and like 15-minute city is kind of badged as an environmental change. I mean, I can't think anyone could disagree with the idea of having healthier, nicer cities to live in. I don't think anyone could disagree with that. When it comes to restricting people's movements, whether that's a perceived restriction or an actual restriction in terms of fining people, I think then you're onto a different issue there, and it's one as an environmentalist I'd be uncomfortable with. I think giving people access to nature is tremendous. Restricting people's movement around cities.
But if we think about this, Christian, how are they going to improve these green spaces? They're apparently planning 25 new or enlarged national nature reserves. Now, how? Knock down houses? Do they ring-fence brownfield sites so that we've got fewer houses and house prices increase? It feels like people, even though it appears that people are at the centre of this plan, I'm not sure that they are.
I think that we could not very easy, that's very much a broad statement there, but I think we could relatively easily increase people's access to good quality green space. And when it comes to green space or wet space, it's the quality as well that matters. So as you've just kind of suggested there, a grotty old park is not very good. However, with just some minimal spend, minimal effort, you can turn that park into a little bit of a healthier space for humans and for wildlife. You could rewild some of the areas. You could plant some hedges in that park, for example. When it comes to how we're going to increase our area across the country, well, we've got to look at, as is being looked at, farming practices. We farm like the uplands in many parts of this country, and that's not an economically viable operation the way that we're farming it now. Perhaps we need to start thinking differently about how we manage that land. Could we reforest some of that land? Could we look at could we look at things like our rivers, which is being looked at by the government?
I agree with that.
Rewiggle our rivers more. So there is things that we could do which would have massive impact, and it won't have a negative effect on house price, etc. It could actually increase them as well.
Possibly. But I think, Christian, what I would like to see, and it sounds like in essence you probably agree with me on this, is that I want individuals, humans, especially children actually, to be exposed to a diversity of natural space. I want forests, wetlands, beaches, marshlands. You know, they all offer very different gifts to our physical and emotional health. And I'm very concerned when the government is going to say, well, you know, you've got a green space, only 15 minutes from your house. Well, I'd like to take the children on the train and take them to one of our 30,000 kilometres of coastland that we have in this country. I feel like the government are trying to make us live these very small lives.
And I'd be very, very concerned as well. And I am concerned about that. And I think that, the idea of having livable cities, sustainable cities, you can't disagree with. But that has to be backed with the correct infrastructure. As you quite rightly said there, get on the train and go to the coast. Of course, that's tremendous. That's what we should all be doing. Everything should be done to stop us wanting to get into our cars. And that means an infrastructure that allows that. And I'm very much against penalising people. I'd much rather encourage people. I think that is one of the reasons why, for example, the plastic pollution issue was so successful in terms of the changes that it created, is because it wasn't a negative campaign, and we weren't really restricting people. Yes, there was paying for your plastic bags and things like this, but there was never any sort of negative, you're stopping people from doing something.
Yeah.
We encouraged people to change their behaviour, and it worked. It didn't just work for individuals, it worked for companies and then the government as well. And I would far rather, as an environmentalist, as a natural scientist, see us encourage people to get out, to enjoy the natural habitats, to when they're thinking about ripping up their kind of driveways, stop. Think about, having some kind of grass still there. Think about putting a hedge instead of a fence, encouraging people to be different, to create their own green spaces, and for councils and for local authorities to do so as well, and for house builders as well. I'd much rather see that encouragement than any sort of restrictions and that kind of that punitive punishment.
Yeah, the coercive behaviour. Thank you so much, Dr. Christian Dunn there. Lovely to talk to you this morning. Thanks a lot. Right, my panel are back with me. I am delighted to be joined today by broadcaster and restaurateur Tonya Buxton and former SAS trooper and author Phil Campion. Now then, Tonya, you get divorced. We're talking about Princess Diana here. Her letters, which she wrote privately, are going on sale. What do you think about this?
It's that thing that makes your stomach just clinch. And the fact that this couple, the Cassims, are selling them, and they're saying the reason they're selling them is because it's too much of a responsibility for their children to have, and they're giving the money to charity. Are they giving all the money, or is it a
section
of the charity? But this is wrong on every single level. When you write something privately, it should stay private. And this couple are disgusting. They were no friends of Princess Diana.
So she wrote 32 letters to these friends between 1995 and 1996 to her friends Susie and Tarek Caffeine. They're selling the letters because they say, as Tony said, owning them is a great responsibility. In these letters, she said in 1996, I'm having a very difficult time. Pressure is serious and coming from all sides. She says it's too difficult sometimes to keep one's head up, and today I'm on my knees and just longing for this divorce to go through as the possible cost is tremendous. It's quite an insight, Phil.
There's a responsibility in friendship as far as I'm concerned as well, and these people haven't got any responsibility whatsoever other than their bank account as far as I can see here. Do you know, I just, you know, whether you're claiming it's all going to go to charity or not, or if you're going to make a Hancock donation, as I called it with his money the other day, do you know what I mean? It's not... This is wrong on every level. You don't just do that, do you? You don't do that to your friend. If they really were friends, I'll keep seeing the word friend in there. That ain't a friend, is it? That's no way a friend.
Yeah. I may have been described as a butterfly, wrote the late Princess of Wales, but I don't want to fly away from this lovely family. And she was referring, she says, in that to the...
This is another thing. So, presumably all this stuff has been leaked from these letters. The sales campaign's already started, isn't it?
Yeah, hasn't
it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well done. Absolutely well done.
They're expected to be sold for about £90,000. She met the couple when she used to visit the Royal Brompton Hospital, apparently, and I can't help but think £90,000 is not a lot for a member of the royal family. You think they might want them back?
I wonder, but like you said, they've already been leaked. A lot of what's been said in there has already been leaked. I just, you know that if they were worried about maybe what the family perceived, why didn't they ask the royal family what their thoughts were on that before they did this? Because I can't imagine anyone from King Charles across the board thinking this is a good idea.
Yeah.
And how awful for her sons, for Princess Diana's sons, to have to see their mother's raw emotion just up for sale.
Yeah, it's very strange. Right, another big story today. So this is the wonderful London mayor who is talking about Sadiq Khan. He's been in collaboration with the owners of the Ritz Hotel and Harrods. And he would like to restore VAT-free shopping for tourists. And I can't help but feel that at the moment, when we are all really struggling to pay our bills and taking off some VAT from a meal that we could go and eat in a restaurant and try and keep a pub open, should be on offer for a lot of people, not just those who can afford to shop in Harrods and don't live in this country.
I get that. You've got to make your money from wherever you can get it in. And the people that are going to be eating there anyway are already in this country. But if we can attract a few more in, then perhaps that will help your economy. I think that's where the mentality is behind this. Do you know what I mean? I don't know a lot about figures and all that sort of stuff. It's not really my area. But what I can see with Sadiq Khan in particular is he's normally taxing everybody. Do you know what I mean? This time he's trying to take it away, isn't he? Do you know what I mean?
He'll tax everybody.
Did you call him the wonderful Sadiq Khan?
Well, I was being slightly ironic.
Oh, gosh, it didn't come across enough.
Oh, did it not? I'd like to clarify that I was being trying to be sarcastic at that point.
Because this man, he hates London, he hates Londoners.
Yeah.
He doesn't care about children dying on the streets. He is the vilest of mayors we've ever had in London.
Tell us what you really think. Obviously,
don't sit on the fence.
In my opinion, and I'm sure that the people are voting him in as mayor, so there's someone who's falling for this, but it's the one time that I might agree with him.
Except that it should be surely if we're going to reduce our VAT to get our country growing, or do you think tourists?
I just think that the more tourism we have spending money in Britain, it's a good thing. It's a really good thing. Would I like it to come down to the public as well? Possibly, yes. But on this particular level, tourists, who can get their VAT back, I think any spending in Britain from abroad is a really good idea. So I can't believe I'm agreeing with this man, but I am on this one.
OK, I mean, we've got the worst economy. Was it the least growth in the G7 yesterday? So, frankly, if people are coming here from overseas, they can afford to contribute a bit of that to our tax. Anyway, that's the end of our first hour. The Bank of England is poised to raise interest rates. What was I just saying? For the 10th time in a row tomorrow, the brilliant Liam Halligan will be with me in the studio in the next hour to discuss what that means for the money in your pocket. See you in a few minutes.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. Although the strongest of the winds in the north of Scotland are now easing, it stays windy across much of the UK through the rest of the day. A lot of cloud as well, and rain for some. but not for all. The rain mainly associated now with this warm front. That's going to bring some bursts of wet weather to Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland and northwest England. Either side of that, some brighter weather, mostly dry in the south, South Wales and southwest England, seeing some sunny spells. Northeast Scotland, still a few showers around and still a brisk breeze, but both those factors easing through the afternoon. And then really we've got this slice of cloudy and occasionally wet weather in between, pepping up the rain across western Scotland and northwest England later. And temperatures up at 10 or 11 Celsius in the south, 8 degrees further north. So a little milder in the north compared with Tuesday, but it's cloudier and it stays breezy through the day. Overnight, the winds do fall light, and in the northeast of Scotland, perhaps a touch of frost before the cloud thickens and outbreaks of rain move through later. And towards the south, a lot of cloud cover. So for the vast majority, it's a frost-free night. Temperatures around the mid to low single figures. But it's a wet start for Scotland on Thursday. Heavy rain across western Scotland and the northwest Highlands, seeing considerable accumulations of rain over the next 36 hours. So staying wet here. The rain also affecting the Northern Isles, but central belt southwards by the afternoon, it's largely dry, a lot of cloud, still some drizzly showers towards western areas, but otherwise for many places it's just a cloudy, breezy day. But that breeze is coming from the southwest, so it is mild, 12 or 13 Celsius. Warm spots likely Exeter, Hereford and Yorkshire. Into the afternoon and evening, the cloud sticks around. There'll be further rain across Scotland, but that does tend to ease. It becomes more showery before more wet weather pushes into the far north on Friday. Stays changeable this weekend, but it's fairly mild at times.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Before midday, we'll cover how millions of children will miss school on the UK's biggest day of strikes for over a decade. Do you support the strikers? Let me know your thoughts. And as the Bank of England prepares to raise interest rates for the 10th time in a row tomorrow, how will higher rates impact businesses and the property market? I'm going to be analysing the numbers with our very own brilliant Liam Halligan. That's all coming up after a look at the latest news with Ray.
Good morning, it's 11 a.m. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Hundreds of thousands of workers are taking part in Walkout Wednesday, the biggest day of industrial action for more than a decade. Up to 500,000 workers belonging to 7 trade unions have walked out over pay, jobs and conditions. Teachers belonging to the National Education Union are starting their first day of strikes, leaving 85% of schools fully or partially closed. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan admitted to us they're not close to a deal.
They didn't break down, but they basically said very clearly, look, we can't do anything to stop this strike. This is going ahead on the 1st of February, but we do have 28 days between this and the next strike, so we will continue those discussions. But what we can't do is offer inflation busting, pay rises, because we're really focused on getting inflation down and halving the inflation for everybody, so we all feel better and have more money in our pockets.
Well, that's her view. Kevin Courtney is the General Secretary of the National Education Union. He says the government needs to make a deal.
They never thought we'd reach these thresholds. They weren't planning on us reaching them. And since we've reached the thresholds, 40,000 more people have joined the union as well. So it does show there's a huge strength of feeling in the profession that government must act and put things right. I think Gillian Keegan is hoping that the strike won't be effective and there won't be any further action. There could be further action. She needs to do a deal so that that doesn't happen.
Border Force officers and bus and train drivers have also walked out today, causing widespread travel disruption. Train drivers belonging to Asylum and the RMT are taking their first industrial action of the year, with another walkout scheduled for Friday. Asylum General Secretary Mick Whelan told us workers are badly affected by the cost of living crisis.
Form of compromise has to take place. But, you know, we see it's not just rail workers, don't we? We see there's about 1 million people out on strike today, from the civil service to the teachers to the lecturers to all sorts of people all over the place. So, yes, there's a cost of living crisis. All workers are feeling it. And in all sectors, at some point, someone's got to take the shackles off and allow people to talk and make the deals that need to be done for the good of the country.
The latest figures show that UK house prices have fallen for the 5th month in a row, down by 0.6% on December. Nationwide's house price index shows the average UK home now costs just over £258,000. Annual growth in prices slowed to 1.1% in January. That's compared to 2.8% in December. Comes as the Bank of England is poised to raise interest rates for the 10th consecutive time. Will Rice of Generation Home told us demand for mortgages has fallen dramatically.
Yesterday, the Bank of England also disclosed that the number of mortgage approvals was at 35,000 in December. So if you look at where were we 5 months ago, that number is down from about 65 to 70,000. And then if you break out remortgaging from purchase, remortgages are doing a lot better. So the purchase numbers are down considerably more than 50%.
Well, retail prices are at a record high after a rise in inflation last month. January saw the highest inflation rate ever listed in the food category. Food rose to 13.8%. That's up 0.6% from the month before. Meanwhile, clothing and footwear prices eased during the New Year sales. In other news, a further 1,500 patients of a convicted breast surgeon are being recalled so their treatment can be investigated. Ian Patterson was handed a 20-year prison sentence in 2017 after he was convicted on 17 counts of wounding people with intent. Over 14 years, he subjected more than 1,000 patients to unnecessary and damaging operations in the West Midlands. The new patients were discovered after a trawl through old IT systems. And a new report claims Alec Baldwin's so-called reckless actions directly caused the fatal shooting of cinematographer Helena Hutchins on the set of the movie Rust in 2021. Santa Fe District Attorney's Office alleges that the actor failed to attend mandatory firearms training. Both Baldwin and the film's armourer have now been formally charged with involuntary manslaughter. If convicted, he could face up to 5 years in jail. Showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield says Mr Baldwin's media interviews prior to being charged could potentially be used against him.
When Alec Baldwin was first approached by police officers on the set, he says, "I'm the one that shot the gun." However, in in interviews that he gave to media, several media outlets throughout this process, Alec says that the gun just went off automatically. It just went off, he told ABC. So I think that that really is going to hurt him in the end, giving those interviews when you have contradictory video.
You're watching and listening to GB News, the People's Channel. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Bev.
Good morning to you. Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. Here's what's coming up on the show this morning. Thousands of schools across England and Wales will be closed today as teachers begin their biggest strike action in more than a decade. It's part of the biggest day of walkouts since 2011, with 500,000 workers across various fields taking part. Downing Street has warned the public to expect significant disruption. Elsewhere, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are facing rebellion over their economic plans. Senior Tories blame them for dire forecasts. It comes as the Bank of England is predicted to raise interest rates to a new 15-year high tomorrow. And I'll be joined in the studio by broadcaster Tonya Buxton and former SAS trooper Phil Campion for another 45 minutes of the day's top stories. And of course, this show is much improved with your views. Do not forget to vote in my Twitter poll this morning. I'm asking you, is your day being disrupted by the strikes? And if so, I'd like to know how. At the moment, the vast majority of you, about 76%, say no, it hasn't affected your day. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, to let me know what you think. So train drivers from the ASLEF and RMT unions are striking today as well, with another scheduled for this Friday. Our reporters are out and about covering the strikes and its impact on commuters. Let's go live to Euston Station, where our reporter Paul Hawkins has the latest. Good morning, Paul. Sounds quite noisy there down at Euston. Is it more quiet than usual, though?
Very quiet. In fact, there are no trains running from the station today, so it doesn't get much quieter than that. And in fact, the picket line that was here earlier has disassembled, if that's even a word. I was standing here in July last year on the first day of the first rail strikes, the first sector to take industrial action in the country, and I'm still standing here somewhat 7-8 months later. Now, today the strike action is primarily by ASLEF because it's the train drivers who are on strike, and most of them are represented by ASLEF, although there are 200 drivers represented by the RMT. But the dispute is basically the same. It's about paying conditions. The deal that's on the table from the Rail Delivery Group, who represent the rail franchises, is 4% backdated to last year, 4% this year, with certain conditions attached. ASLEF say that's not good enough. They're continuing with talks, but at the moment the industrial action continues, and so most trains in England are disrupted, most services are disrupted. The advice is, as ever, if you're going to travel by train, check before you travel. Services into Scotland and into Wales also affected, and of course the knock-on effect is also on the economy. We were talking about growth yesterday with that IMF forecast, and of course they do get forecasts wrong and the figures can sometimes be out, but effectively the UK economy expected to shrink compared to other G7 economies, and one of the reasons, or at least it's not helping, is the fact that the economy is suffering when businesses can't get workers in onto the shop floor, when businesses can't function, and indeed in the hospitality industry they're losing billions because of the lack of footfall caused by the strike. So huge knock-on effects for this industrial action, which continues without a resolution.
OK, thank you so much, Paul. Paul Hawkins there, down at a very quiet station. Let's cross over to Hull, where our reporter Anna Riley can bring us the latest from up north. Good morning, Anna. How is it looking there for people trying to go about their day?
Good morning, Bev. Well, it's certainly busy here in Hull. There's actually 4 different unions that have assembled on this picket line, so not just ASLEF and the RMT, but they've also been joined by members from Unison and Unite, so it's certainly busy here, a big turnout for the unions. And it's the same message really as all the previous strikes. They're saying they haven't been able to come to the agreement in terms of pay and conditions, and they're saying that we're in a cost of living crisis and the offers that have been put on the table in terms of pay rises just aren't enough. So there's still a sense of frustration amongst the workers here. I spoke to Nigel Roebuck earlier. He's a district officer for ASLEF, and he does still feel like there's public support for the strikers, and it's obviously not just the train strikers, is it, today? It's many unions assembling together for the Trades Union Congress Day of Action.
OK, thank you, Anna. Anna Riley there up in Hull. You've been messaging me as well. Paul has said, regarding the school strikes, it's unbelievable that the General Secretary of the NEU, Kevin Courtney, is so disingenuous when he berates the government for their supposed lack of funding in the school system. And Steve has said, the teachers on strike, my God, who'd want a job in teaching? Christmas off, 6 weeks summer holidays, unbelievable pension, just like the nurses. I have my job in a factory, 4 on, 4 off, 1,300 quid a month, poor teachers. Now, over 7 million children will miss lessons today as teachers join the biggest day of industrial action in over a decade. Our reporter Ellie Costello is at the NEU rally in London for more. Good morning, Ellie. A lot of our viewers getting in touch, not terribly sympathetic this morning with the teachers, particularly given what the children have been through, so much school missed in the last 3 years. What's the feeling down there? What's the justification from these teachers?
Well, Bev, you can see why parents and families might think that. This is thought to be one of the most disruptive strikes that we've seen this winter. 7 million children will be missing school today. 150,000 teachers are thought to have walked out. It's in a strike over pay and conditions. And you can see that they're lining up here for this march that's going to take on Westminster a little bit later on today. They're going to be marching until about 2 p.m. this afternoon. Thousands of people here that have been gathering since early this morning. It feels quite like a carnival atmosphere. It does feel very lively. Lots of conversations being had about conditions and how they want to improve them. So let's speak to some teachers now. I can see some behind us. We are trying to walk backwards here. It's a bit of a difficulty. Good morning to you all. So why are we out on strike today? Why have we left our classrooms behind?
Well, we don't really want to be on strike, but we're being forced to because we are. Over the last 10 years, we've seen teacher retention, teacher pay has been plummeting, and for new teachers like me, the idea of making this into a career, it's getting more and more difficult to be able to stay in the classroom and support students because we're lacking the resources, we're lacking the support, and it's really something needs to be done, and that's why we're here on the streets today.
Lots of people would say that these strikes are frustrating because they see teachers as having really good pay on average, £30,000 to £40,000, 13 weeks holiday a year, good sick pay. They would see your benefits as very good and they don't see what the problem is. What would you say to them?
Well, I would invite anyone to step into any classroom into this country, see the conditions that we're working with, the sort of things we are expected to do to support our students, which we adore, we love our jobs, but the climate in which we're working in isn't conductive of a successful education system, and it feels like this government is taking less of education as a right, it's more of a burden which they have to tick off funding, very minimal to get by. Because right now, our wage expectations are, and just in terms of the national climate as well, the UK is falling behind and becoming the sick man of Europe, sick man of the world, in terms of our education, our healthcare, all of our essential services, and because our government is just not doing enough.
And what about children whose education has been disrupted over the past 3 years due to COVID lockdowns? They're now going to have, it looks like, 7 days of strike action by their teachers. So many people would say that's just not fair on the children. Is this the right course of action?
Well, what's not fair on the students is, again, the conditions in which they're in the classroom, the way that teachers are being lack of support from the government. That is what is really going to disrupt their education, is that they do not have that solid support every day in the classroom. But we can't get that support if we're complacent. the only way we can get there is if we hold this government to account, if we take to the streets, rallying to a cause to say to them, this is not enough, our students deserve better, teachers deserve better, parents deserve better, this country deserves better. And without doing this action, the government is not listening.
Did you let your school know that you'd be on strike action today?
The school was aware that most of the teachers is in our union. I did not give full warning because it defeats the purpose of a strike. If we're giving full warning about who's coming in and who's not, it gives potential to prepare. And strike is meant to be disruptive. If you can prepare against it, then it's not being as disruptive as it can be.
Well, thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you, really do appreciate it. So there you go, Bev, hearing there from a teacher, so many thousands of them here in central London. They will be marching down to Westminster to try and get their voices heard. The National Education Union suggesting that 150,000 teachers are out on strike. That's going to be affecting 85% of schools. The Department of Education disputes that. They say that many schools are remaining open, but we will get a clearer picture throughout the day of how disruptive these strikes are going to be. But ultimately, there are parents and families who turned up at the school gates today not knowing whether or not their children would be able to attend classes. So we are expecting it's going to be a very disruptive day.
Thank you, Ellie. Brilliant job. Ellie Costello there with the teachers. I was just watching that and thinking, this is what happens when you underestimate and you undermine the value of education by quarantining healthy kids at home. Guess what? The teachers decide, doesn't matter if you're there or not. We've got a Twitter poll running on this morning. I'm asking you, is your day being disrupted by the strikes? I want to know if it is, and if so, how? 78% of you say that you haven't been disrupted by the various industrial action taking place today. Jenny has got in touch and she says, I think after lockdowns, people have become resilient to rearranging their lives when their normal pattern is interrupted, so just let them strike. And Elmo says, I'm fully behind them. Teachers deserve better pay and conditions. Many work long days and extremely hard. If you don't support the teachers that look after our children, try homeschooling your kids. You wouldn't last 5 minutes. Damn right I wouldn't last 5 minutes, Elmo. We tried it in lockdown, and that's the point. You're inflicting that on parents again for another, was it 15, 16 days over the next few weeks? I think it's diabolical. Right, email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me why I'm wrong. I always like that. Coming up, the Bank of England is expected to raise interest rates for the 10th time in a row tomorrow. What is this going to mean for you and your mortgage, your taxes and the pound in your pocket? I will look at the numbers in detail with Liam Halligan just after the break. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at GBNews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel. Very good morning. It's 11:21. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Now, the Bank of England is expected to raise interest rates for the 10th time in a row tomorrow, with the base rate forecast to increase to 4%. Our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, travelled to Kent to hear how higher interest rates will impact businesses and the property market.
The Dog at Wingham is a popular pub, hotel and restaurant in deepest Kent.
Mark, great to see you. Liam Halligan, GB.
Owner Mark Bridgham works all hours to make this business a success for himself and his 30-strong workforce. But high taxes, rising costs and above all, soaring energy bills means the Dog is struggling to make a profit.
In a nutshell, our gas and electric was £36,000 per annum, and under the current price cap, it's around £80,000 per annum. And when the price cap ends, it's going to around...
In April?
In April, yeah, like a couple of months away, £120,000 per annum.
For months, Mark hasn't paid himself a wage, despite running a multiple award-winning business. Inflation means his costs, especially for food, are spiralling. And in the current climate, Mark can't risk passing on those price rises to potential customers.
We are offering the best deals we've ever offered in a desperate bid to keep the place at least breaking even.
And 9 successive interest rate rises have squeezed the Dog's guests even more.
Their mortgage going through the roof, their shopping going through the roof, their utilities going through the roof. So they coming out to a lovely place like the Dog is one of the first things that get cut.
For years before the pandemic, the Bank of England kept interest rates below 1%. They then went even lower during COVID lockdown itself. Since then, rates have risen steadily to 3.5% in a bid to tackle inflation. Near the Kent coast in Sandwich, James Halligan, no relation, runs the British Hovercraft Company. A successful manufacturer, he exports 80% of the craft his company makes. But with wages, taxes and interest rates all rising, James says the pressure on his business is simply too much.
It's putting more and more pressure on businesses like ours. Our wages have to go up, and we'll put those alongside the fact that our energy costs have gone up, our interest rates are going up, and we're facing a situation where, as exporters, the confidence in the UK is at a low.
So what of the impact of rising interest rates on the property market? Down the Kent coast in Deal, estate agents say a 2008-style house price collapse won't happen.
I think interest rates will go up a little bit further, but perhaps not as much as we feared.
So you don't see a big house price fall then?
No, I believe more in a correction of value as opposed to a collapse.
The Bank of England is likely to raise interest rates tomorrow, probably to 4%. But inflation is now falling as the economy slows. So an end to these rate rises could soon be on the horizon. Liam Halligan, GB News.
Soon be on the horizon, Liam Halligan. I see what you did there. That was very clever, wasn't it? If you're listening on the radio...
So I get the big bucks.
There was a lovely panning shot of a beach and the sea in the background. Now, this is... It sounds like it is a bad news story that interest rates are going up, but I think you finished on a more uplifting note there to say this might be the last time. Is it?
Or the penultimate time. I think interest rates will go up from 3.5% to 4% tomorrow. And then, as I've been saying for quite a few months now, I think they'll peak at either 4 or 4.25% and then stay there for several months. as inflation is squeezed out of the system. Of course, higher interest rates are good news for savers. A lot of GB News viewers and listeners will have some savings. They've been getting interest on their savings, which is less than the rate of inflation for years and years and years, which of course means you're losing money on your savings. But a lot of people who want to get on the housing ladder, particularly younger viewers and listeners, particularly first-time buyers, as those interest rates go up, mortgage rates go up. But I think the estate agent at the end there, Toby Caulfield, was right. I don't think interest rates, the peak, is going to be anywhere near the sort of 6 or 7%, which some people were saying, just a few months ago.
Not you.
Not me.
Can we talk about the expertise of economists? Because there's a piece in the papers today about how the BBC have effectively let the public down because their economics editors aren't as clever, well, as you, Liam. Am I summing that story up correctly?
That is one way of looking at it, I guess. I couldn't possibly... You may say that I couldn't possibly comment. Look, I was part of this BBC study. Tim Davie, the new Director General of the BBC, came in, and he is from a business background, and he wanted to understand complaints he was getting that business and economics broadcasting on the BBC in particular was a bit economically illiterate. And so the BBC asked me and other external economists to talk to them about what we think of the BBC's coverage. And of course, I was honest and open. Look, this is a problem that goes beyond the BBC, right? For years and years and years, I've fought to try and get more economics and business coverage on air, right? On TV, on radio, and indeed in the newspapers, because I personally think broadcasting executives at the BBC and elsewhere underestimate the demand for economics and business coverage. I go into a pub, right? And unless it's my local where they respect me, I'm mobbed by people saying, what do I do with my mortgage? What do I do with my pension? How does my kid buy a house, etc., etc. There's huge demand. The trouble is the BBC seems to have come to a conclusion that I wouldn't come to. It's come to a conclusion that higher spending isn't always seen as a good thing, right? I think we should be coming to a conclusion that higher spending and higher tax can sometimes be a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because I think that's how a lot of people, entrepreneurial people, a lot of people at the sharp end who aren't working in the public sector, think about the world. The BBC's got a sort of fundamentally different worldview than I have, which is probably why they'll never give me a job.
Well, I hope we...
And maybe another reason why they should, because they need to broaden their gene pool.
Yeah.
They need to be a bit more open to how the majority of people in the country think. The majority of the people work for the private sector.
Yeah.
The majority of people think that higher taxes are really bad because they have to pay those taxes while they acknowledge they do have to pay them.
Well, talking about how these affect real people, these interest rate hikes are going to hit those who've got mortgages. Is there anything that people can do now to be like one of those people in the pub? Is there anything people can do now to protect themselves against this increase?
Well, I actually think that I wouldn't fix your mortgage now. I mean, obviously, if you're coming to the end of a variable deal, a fixed rate deal, and you have to refix it, unless you can, conjure up some kind of bridging loan from somewhere, you're going to have to fix your mortgage again quite soon. I would actually wait, though, because I think it won't be long before interest rates are coming down.
OK.
Possibly by the end of the year. And certainly it won't be long before people are concluding that interest rates have now peaked. And once that happens, there is quite a bit of competition in the mortgage market. There is still quite a lot of panic after the Liz Truss quasi-Kwarteng budget when mortgage rates did spike.
Yeah.
But they've come down quite a lot since then.
OK.
And now they're roughly where that if the interest rate is, the Bank of England's rate is 3.5%, you'd expect the average mortgage rate to be sort of 5.56%, because the finance industry puts its pretty big margin on. There should be more competition. And so mortgage rates will go up a little bit as interest rates go up. But I do think the outlook soon will be inflation being squeezed out the system and interest rates coming down. And it's when we expect interest rates to be coming down, that's when you want to start talking to the mortgage companies.
OK. UK annual house price growth slows to 1.1%. What are the implications of that? Well, pretty good if you're trying to get on the housing ladder, I suppose.
It's quite confusing. You know, there is growth annual, so from January last year to January this year, according to the Halifax, but house prices have actually come down a little bit since August.
Right.
They've come down on average across the country by 3.2%, which isn't really all that much when you think about it. This is important because Halifax monitors actual achieved prices. A lot of the other surveys are bids made by estate agents. So Halifax is obviously a very, very authoritative source of house price data. House prices are down about 3% since the top of the market in August. But as the estate agent Toby Caulfield was saying there in my piece from Kent, he doesn't, and I don't foresee a sort of 2008 style house price collapse, some big crash.
Really?
I do think you'll get a levelling out of house prices because the economy is slowing, because, consumers are feeling a cost of living squeeze, but people still need to move house. They still need to buy and sell houses.
Yeah, you see, I kind of suspect there might be a sense that as prices might go down this year, people are sitting and waiting to put them on the market, or to, they're not quite sure what to do.
I think people are waiting to buy because they think prices might come down. Look, in some areas where there's been too much hype, too much speculation, particularly around new builds, house prices will fall quite sharply. But we're talking about macro figures across the board. I don't personally think we're going to see some huge house price correction unless you get a proper thunderous economic downturn and a lot more unemployment, and then you get what we call distressed buyers. People literally can't afford their mortgage because they're out of work, and then they have to sell quickly and cheaply.
And that might... I can't stop looking at the hospitality industry and look at, the guy on your film.
Well,
that's the one
that's why we went to the Dog at Wingham. That guy is an amazing guy. He's all in, his family.
He paid himself a salary.
Well, it's not only that he hasn't paid himself a salary for months. Lots of entrepreneurs don't do that. His utility bill, Bev's gone up from 30 grand to 120 grand. It'll be 120 grand in April.
Well, that's just not doable, is it? Liam, thank you so much. Now, coming up, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson was in the US last night and made some interesting statements to Fox News about what we should be doing with Ukraine. I'm going to bring you that all after your morning's news.
It's 11:30. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Hundreds of thousands of workers are taking part in Walkout Wednesday, the biggest day of industrial action for more than a decade. Up to 500,000 workers belonging to 7 trade unions are striking over pay, jobs and conditions. Teachers belonging to the National Education Union are on the picket line, leaving 85% of schools fully or partially closed. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan told us a deal is not close.
They didn't break down, but they basically said very clearly, look, we can't do anything to stop this strike. This is going ahead on the 1st of February, but we do have 28 days between this and the next strike, so we will continue those discussions. But what we can't do is offer inflation busting, pay rises, because we're really focused on getting inflation down and halving the inflation for everybody, so we all feel better and have more money in our pockets.
Kevin Courtney is the General Secretary of the National Education Union. He says the government needs to find the money.
They never thought we'd reach these thresholds. They weren't planning on us reaching them. And since we've reached the thresholds, 40,000 more people have joined the union as well. So it does show there's a huge strength of feeling in the profession that government must act and put things right. I think Gillian Keegan is hoping that the strike won't be effective and there won't be any further action. There could be further action. She needs to do a deal so that that doesn't happen.
UK house prices have fallen for the 5th month in a row, down by 0.6% on December. Nationwide's house price index shows that the average home now costs just over £258,000. Annual house price growth slowed to 1.1% in January. It comes as the Bank of England is poised to raise interest rates for the 10th consecutive time. And a further 1,500 patients of a convicted breast surgeon are being recalled so their treatment can be investigated. Ian Patterson was handed a 20-year prison sentence in 2017 after he was convicted on 17 counts of wounding people with intent. More than 1,000 patients were subjected to unnecessary and damaging operations in the West Midlands. The new patients were discovered after a trawl through old IT systems. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Back now to Bev.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to Bev Turner Today. It is 11:37. We have a slightly shorter show on a Wednesday because it's PMQs. Let me introduce my panel to you for the last time this morning. Broadcaster Tonya Buxton and former SAS trooper and author Phil Campion. Right. In the Mail, Tonya, another teacher becoming the victim of the trans-naming culture war. What's happened to this guy?
He's been sacked. He's been sacked for bringing up completely commonsensical, decent concerns about what's going on here. He's been called names like transphobic, he's lost his job, he's been vilified for just asking some questions. And this is where I find the big problem. Because, I actually grew up with someone who was trans in the 80s, and I know what she went through to become a woman. It's really, really hard, and what she had to get to that stage to become. So I'm not transphobic at all. I have trans friends. But what they're doing now with this gender fluidity in school is messing with kids' minds. And kids at this time are, you know how they're going through a crazy influx, sometimes are they gay, are they not gay, are they kind of experimenting what they're doing? We must ask them questions and then to help clear their mind. I mean, he said that even if a girl had come in who's called Alice and had come up to him and said, from now on I want you to call me Jane, he would have flagged that and said, why am I suddenly calling this girl Jane? So to go from a girl's name to a boy's name, in this case, he flagged it up. That's all he did. He asked some questions.
And this teacher, Kevin Lister, he's 60 years old. He's got 2 children himself. He said it was the other teachers who he would describe as trans activists who basically raised complaints about him. And this was because the child, it's not a child, at 17, well, yes, you are still officially a child at 17. The 17-year-old student, Lizzie, said that she'd now like to be called Liam, and he was concerned about that. Go on, Phil.
I get that. The critical thing in this for me is this is an ivory tower problem again. This is the people upstairs not understanding the factory floor again.
Yeah.
Right? Because in this segment here it says staff had to make their own decisions, presumably to avoid any liability for the management. Well, if the management are that concerned, then perhaps they put a proper briefing in place that people could understand and adhere to, and then they wouldn't have to sack people when it goes wrong. That's a boss problem.
So you think it's a leadership issue?
It's a massive leadership issue, yeah.
You see...
they're promoting this stuff. They're expecting you to know it, but there's no guidelines in place. He said, I don't know what to do. Do you know what I mean? All I've done is flagged it up and I've lost my job.
Yeah.
Well, that's not fair, is it?
Do you think when it comes to these issues, and there are so many, it seems, individuals now that wish to change their gender, Phil, that we're kind of normalising what used to be a severe mental health condition, body, gender dysphoria, not feeling happy in your own skin, and there are loads of reasons for that, and yet with the risk of being causing offence or being criticised for doing the wrong thing, we're failing to have the correct sorts of conversations with young people.
You are. So what you've done is you've normalised the issue, but you've marginalised the bloke who doesn't understand it as well, haven't you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he doesn't understand that he's been marginalised. He's 60 years old, don't forget. Yeah. So that was like, when he was at school or when he was going through his teens and what have you, that wasn't even thought of. The words weren't even in his vocabulary.
Yeah.
And now he's having to take all that on. I feel sorry for him. There's no way he should have lost his job, that's for sure.
Right,
you know what I mean?
We are letting children down. So, I mean, this man, for asking questions, was sacked for gross misconduct, which is ridiculous. But aside from that, we are letting children down because this whole gender thing is being pushed through, whereas at another time, when I was at school, or when my older children were at school, there was a lot of self-harming going on. There was, like you said, body dysmorphia, and we would then look at what was wrong with that child and give them some help. We wouldn't say, "Oh, you're self-harming. Please knock yourself out. Please carry on doing that." Yeah. You have to look at it as fine, this person might feel that they're in the wrong body, and then I'm sure a very small percentage of these gender issues, that is the truth. But I think in the majority of cases, and I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, but from what I can see and from my experiences being in teaching, is to do with some other issue. And we need to find the other issue to help that child.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to at least be talking about it. Right, Boris Johnson has waded in on the Ukraine-Russian conflict. He likes to be a thorn in the side of Rishi Sunak, doesn't he? He's said that we should basically, every time we've said it would be a mistake to give such and such item of weaponry, he says, to Ukraine, we end up doing it anyway, and it ends up being the right thing to do. And this is in relation to whether they should be given jets jets to Ukraine from us or America. What do you think, Phil?
Look, firstly of all, with the Ukraine thing as a whole, I think, it's right that we're doing something, right? Getting it the right thing at the right time is key with this. You can't just escalate things, because that's what's happening. Yeah. It's escalating, mission creep again, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? It's escalating, and it runs the risk of going out of control. So I don't know what the generals are saying behind this. I don't know what their timeframes are or what their combat indicators are as to things getting worse. But I think he's jumping the gun a little bit myself. I don't think that's called for yet. But I think that he is right in as far as we can't just let it down. We can't put it on the floor and go, right, let's all pull out. Let's forget this ever happened and let's pull the plug on it. We can't do that.
And it's a balance, isn't it? Because we also can't give infinite funds to Ukraine at the moment, in my personal opinion. Right, Tonya, a bit of a lighter story here. When you go for your coffee, we don't find out how much caffeine is in it. And this is a piece in the paper today saying we should be given the right to know.
We really should, because I had no idea that the Pret-a-Manger coffee has 270 milligrams of caffeine compared to 102 that in Starbucks. Now, people are saying, well, why should this make any difference? It's because we metabolise caffeine in a different way. So I know I'm a slow metaboliser of caffeine. So I know that there.
How do you know that?
Because I had a test actually that told me.
How does one find that out?
I actually had a test that told me it, but actually I could, once I knew that it all made sense to me. So I can't have coffee late. Because if I have coffee late, I'm up all night. My daughter, though, is a fast metaboliser, which is wonderful, which means that if she has a coffee, she can't do her eyeliner because her handshake.
Oh, wow.
It's really a good thing to be a fast metaboliser because then you can use caffeine to benefit you. So if you're really feeling sluggish and tired and you have an espresso and you go and train, it's going to give you that boost you need. I don't get that boost because it takes a long time for it to hit me. So I need to know this. So I need to know that maybe I can have a Starbucks coffee at 3 o'clock, but I definitely can't have a Pret-a-Manger one.
How amazing. This is some research by Watchdog, and it shows you that actually a medium Costa coffee cappuccino contained 325 milligrams of caffeine, and a can of Red Bull is only 80. Who knew? Anyway, right, on today's show, I've been asking you, is your day being disrupted by the strikes? We want to know how, and I've been asking you, 79% of you say that you are not disrupted by today's strikes. Well, that does raise the question, then what is the point if they're meant to be causing disruption and they're not? We've made do, haven't we? Right, we've come to the end of the show. It's flown by again. Tonya Buxton, thank you so much. Phil Campion, great to see you. Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst, and PMQs kicks off at midday. I'm Bev Turner. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. Although the strongest of the winds in the north of Scotland are now easing, it stays windy across much of the UK through the rest of the day. A lot of cloud as well, and rain for some, but not for all. The rain mainly associated now with this warm front. That's going to bring some bursts of wet weather to Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland and northwest England. Either side of that, some brighter weather, mostly dry in the south, South Wales and southwest England, seeing some sunny spells. Northeast Scotland, still a few showers around and still a brisk breeze, but both those factors easing through the afternoon. And then really we've got this slice of cloudy and occasionally wet weather in between, pepping up the rain across western Scotland and northwest England later.